Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, in our ongoing study in the Gospel of Mark. We're going to finish up chapter 5. We're going to take a look at the raising of the little 12-year-old girl. Let's go to block 1 and take a look at the text. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion, with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. And at this they were completely astonished. Then he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. Okay, do you notice what's going on here? We've transitioned back to Gentile territory on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, and now Christ is reinstating the command to silence. Now the disciples who were with him are the inner circle: Simon Peter, James, and John. So other than the parents, it was Simon Peter, James, and John. And he issues the command to silence, because now we're in Jewish territory where false conceptions of the Messiah were widespread. False presuppositions had a fairly firm foundation. The Jewish people wanted for and looked for a Messiah like unto a King David, a man with an army who could overthrow Roman occupation. They weren't looking for the Messiah announced by John the Baptist, the Lamb of God. They weren't looking for Isaiah's suffering servant. They were looking for one like unto King David. And they kept wanting to make Jesus king. So in Jewish territory, he revealed his messianic identity in stages, slowly, but he did not want to reinforce this enthusiasm for a Messiah who was a militant leader. He wanted to eliminate that false presupposition. Let's go to the commentary in block 2. We're looking at Edwards. Only Peter, James, and John did accompany Jesus to the girl's side. When Jesus says she is only sleeping, the mourners laugh at him. The mourners have ruled out any possibility of divine intervention. But for those who die in faith, God sees them as sleeping. Jesus uses the Aramaic Talitha, and that means, in the Aramaic, it means lamb. In other words, if you took a literal meaning, it would be the command, "Lamb, arise." The child's walking and eating attest to her total restoration. This healing functions as a sign for the future Lamb of God, who also will be raised up. It does, obviously, we have the surface story. We have the symbolic narrative. We have the existential narrative. But fundamentally, this narrative functions as a sign. And many times, narratives function as signs in the Gospels. A sign for the future Lamb of God. The Lord is, in specific instances, slowly unveiling the true messianic identity, which is the Messiah as suffering servant, the Messiah as Lamb of God, and Christ is slowly unveiling his true messianic identity. It will be fully unveiled at the cross in the moment of complete abandonment. It will be fully revealed when he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That's the moment when the veil is split from top to bottom. That's the moment when the centurion cries out, "Surely this man is the Son of God." So that the moment of the cross, that will be the full unveiling of the true messianic identity of Christ. Up until that time, there are narratives that give a glimpse of that coming messianic identity. We have one here in the raising of the 12-year-old girl as raising up after the command, "Lamb, arise." The healing functions as a sign for the future Lamb of God who also will be raised up. Now I went to verse 43 because this is the command to silence. That's verse 43. So we are back into the messianic secret again, so I wanted to look at verse 43. "And he instructed them," and he uses diastello, to admonish, to prohibit, "that no one should know this," from gnosko, to learn. No one should learn of this raising of the child out of death. And I'll read the literal translation. "And he instructed them that no one should know this." And he instructed them that no one should learn of this. We're getting these moments. We get, until the cross, we get moments of unveiling. We get glimpses of Christ and his true messianic identity. We have the Lamb of God commanding the little girl, "Lamb, arise." She is innocent. She is adopted into the family of God through the command, "Lamb, arise." It's very, very powerful. And we have to remember that it actually is a sign. And let's take a look at 42 and 43 in block 1. Well, I'll tell you what, 41, 42, and 43, where Christ took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means in Aramaic, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Literally, it says, "Lamb, arise." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished, the parents, Simon Peter, James, and John. And then Christ gave strict orders not to let anyone learn about this, and told them to give her something to eat. Very, very powerful. And if you go to block 2 and look at E, Jesus uses the Aramaic talitha, meaning lamb, when he commands, "Lamb, arise." This healing functions as a sign for the future Lamb of God, who also will be raised up. The future Lamb of God will be raised up. And the child's walking around and eating gives a visible sign to her total restoration. Remember Christ, when confronting the apostles, asked for something to eat. to reveal is complete resurrection as a sign. So this is a close to chapter 5, and it does bring up the central issue of the command to silence, because now we have the command to silence reinstituted in Gentile territory on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, or Lake Tiberias. Christ gave the command to testify. Go back and testify to your people, he told the healed man. But now we're back in the western Jewish territory, where there's a very prevalent presupposed idea of the Messiah as a king who will have an army and overthrow Roman occupation. They kept wanting to make Jesus king. He wants that kind of talk to be silenced. So any miracles that would reinforce false ideas, they come coupled with the command to silence in the Jewish territory. In Gentile territory, it is the command to testify that is given. But now we're back in the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, near Capernaum, Jewish territory, and now Christ has reenacted the Messianic secret. The theme of the Gospel of Mark continues as the theme of the Messianic secret. It is a Messianic secret that is unveiled in increments through glimpses like this narrative here, but the Messianic identity will be fully unveiled when the actual veil of the temple is split from top to bottom, and that is at the crucifixion, in the moment when Christ cries out in abandonment. That is when full disclosure, full unveiling of the Messianic identity of Jesus as the Christ will become fully visible. Even the centurion cries out, "Surely this man is the Son of God." So full disclosure comes in the crucifixion. Here we have a narrative as sign of the upcoming unveiling. We have a narrative as sign. A sign for the future Lamb of God, who also will be raised up. That concludes chapter 5. Next lesson we begin 6. We're going to look at the first 6 verses. And it's going to be very interesting because it's going to look at a time when Christ did not heal people. There was a problem, and that problem occurred back in Nazareth. So next lesson we'll take a look at 6, 1 through 6, and the problem of the lack of faith in Nazareth.